that. There we go. So my personal intention for calling in this group is that I was really fascinated by the session that Scott offered on the active peace circles, and I just saw an incredible potential, and yeah, something, I cannot even put it into words, something just felt right. So that's why I wanted to do this particular conflict lab. But we have an intention which is also to address a real life conflict. So this is not going to be a discussion about the method, it's just an example, so that everybody's seen how that works, and then that everybody can have their own reflections for themselves or share them. Yeah, I think that's how it feels for me at the moment. And I'm sure Scott is going to add something.
I'll just add one little piece, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about active peace circles in a moment. But it's there's no formula here for actually getting into a circle. There's no formula. Once we're in the circle, there is kind of a formula that comes from restorative justice and some of the deepening pieces that I've brought into it. But just to maybe engage yourselves in the process, it's a community-led and community-initiated process. And if you're familiar with the work of Bill Urey, he wrote the very popular book, Getting to Yes. He's a well-known international level mediator. One of his more recent books, not that recent now, but it's called The Third Side. And in his view, there's your two main parties in a conflict. The third side is the community that steps in and takes responsibility for transforming the conflict. And that's a really relevant idea to what we're going to be exploring here. And so for me, this is a deep experience of not knowing and beginner's mind, what's going to happen here and what's going to flow out of it. And I just really welcome your support as the community in looking at this conflict and transforming it from an energy of real transformation and restoration and healing. I think that's all I have to say about the intention, Dita.
Thank you. And maybe Shanti, if you want to add something.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I just I have an incredible amount of gratitude for both Dita and Scott for organizing this and for showing up and for lending your time and expertise to me, as well as this entire community for the commitment that you've made by showing up here today and being a part of this. And I just echoing what Scott said, I'm coming into this with the beginner's mind. I want to bring a childlike curiosity, non-judgmental awareness, and I think most of all, an attitude of compassion for myself, for the other stakeholders involved in this conflict, and for the community at large, the ripple effect that it has outwards. So I think that's my intention coming into here, and I welcome any insights that come out of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. So before, no, I'll say that about the videos before we do the session. So over to you, Scott.
Okay. So the active peace circle model, what I called in the session that I offered is restorative justice unleashed. So I'm just going to say a little bit more about the context to set the stage. Active peace circles take really the best of restorative justice, but take it out of the criminal justice system and give it over to the community, to empower the community with the principles and the practices of restorative justice so that we can address the full range of social, environmental, interpersonal harm that isn't going to be addressed by the criminal justice system or any other system. And so there's a really important piece here around the community taking responsibility to step in and heal harm. And it's about harm and repairing the harm. That feels to me like a really clean lens, a really clean focus, right? We have to fully identify the harm, and then we're coming together to repair the harm, not trying to punish anybody, not trying to shame anybody. And we ask for accountability from those who caused the harm. And in our repair, one of the things that I bring into the active peace circle model that you will not find in restorative justice typically is we want to be really upfront about we want to change the system. We want to break the cycles. We want to break the patterns of abuse, of violence, of harm. So we want to be really upfront with that. And so there's a way in which it asks a lot of people. It's very much a different paradigm. And so we really have to set the stage for it, prepare ourselves personally, and then prepare each of the participants. And, you know, I already talked about the restorative justice mindset in the interview I recorded for the summit, and more deeply into the process in the group. So we're gonna fast forward through a lot of that today and just start. Just kind of hear about the conflict and check in with Shanti, and we'll just begin from what I consider a restorative mindset. So with that, I think we're probably ready to dive in.
Thank you. All right, so I invite us all to just again have a deep breath with that in mind, bringing that restorative intention to our hearts, and knowing that we are a container for this. And in order to make this as transparent and easy to follow as possible in Zoom, I ask you all to turn off your videos, and so that if you go to the video settings, you can also set hide non-video participants. It's the last option. And then we will all see just...
Want me to quickly show people how to get to those video settings?
All right, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you,
2
Ben.
seconds. Yeah, it's a little tricky, but in the lower left-hand corner where you see stop video, just to the right of that, you see this little caret here. You click that, and then at the bottom of that list is that setting. So hopefully that's clear. Then you'll just see whoever's video is on.
And then you just have to stop your video, and that's it. Thank you. And we know you're all there. Deborah, if you can turn off your video. Thank you. And I don't know, Scott, should I stay here or?
Yes, yes, please. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you and Shanti stay with me. So are we going to present the Google Doc? Was that the next step?
All right, I'll put it in the chat if you want to talk about it, Shanti. So in the chat, there's a document that Shanti very generously compiled for us.
So I don't plan on talking about the trigger and trauma part. If you'd like to read that, please feel free to. Just for my own safety, I'm going to refrain from verbalizing it. But you know, to put it as concisely as possible, I'm, as many people working in healthcare are in many different parts of the world, I am part of an incredibly complex healthcare system that has a long history of capitalist, patriarchal, colonial roots, and at this time is often run more like a business with the goal of pathologizing and removing the pathology within people in a society, probably less focused on the idea of holistic or overall well-being. And you know, we're discussing my specific story, but I'm not unique in any way. I think there are many people just like me in other parts of this country that are experiencing something similar. But I've spent my entire education and training within this field, and I've had positive experiences, and then more recently some harmful experiences, but all of them have been within this very intricate, complex system with this history. The recent experience that I had was at an Ivy League institution where I am doing my training, and therefore I came into it with a great deal of veneration for the institution that I was coming into, and had very high hopes. And it turned out to be somewhat of a toxic workplace environment where I was often being asked to put the safety of patients as well as the safety of myself at risk, and often found myself as being complicit in this system in a way that I was getting further and further away from the mission and the goals for which I'd entered this profession in the first place, and to serve others and improve their well-being. And it eventually decimated my health to the point that I could not function. I want to be able to return to this system, and have a very realistic understanding of where are the places that I have agency that I can do something about and where I don't, in a way that is constructive for everybody involved, in a way that promotes healing for everybody involved, and allows us to move to a place that is more humane and more sustainable, most of all for the patients that we're supposed to be serving, but also for everybody else within this system. And the fear that I have going into it is because my my health was so deeply impacted by this environment. There's this fear that although I'm in a very different place now, will I be able to return to that system and maintain my well-being in the process of following this mission that I have. And being effective. So yeah, I think that should sum up for the most part what I'm looking to do.
Yeah, thank you, Shanti. That's a really beautiful summary. And I just really appreciate your willingness to put it out there and show up for this. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of resource, you know. Yeah, I feel that you're just really present with us, and you're bringing in what I call the restorative mindset, right? You talked about healing for everyone, not just yourself. I didn't hear you say, I want to be right, you know, I want to punish these people. So, and your focus on this changing the system is also a part of the active peace circle process, and just so much a part of what needs to happen now, right? I mean, we have to change these systems, and there just isn't a lot of that going on, people focused at that level. So I'm just really appreciating what you're bringing, and I just feel these really deep human needs in play. And I would just like to venture some guesses around, you know, a need for respect and safety and belonging in your educational community. And those are deep needs. So just to acknowledge that there's really tender humanness in play here, along with the bigger picture that you're bringing. You know, we don't want to deny our vulnerable parts and our needs. So I feel like you're coming into this from a very good place. And I'm assuming that you've made some attempts at conflict transformation here and being heard and trying to impact the system, and that, how has that worked out?
Yeah, I was very lucky because medical education in my country today, we're not taught how to manage a team or how to deal with conflict. It's not something that's formally taught. It's just something that's assumed that you know how to do, and then you're kind of like thrown into the lion's den a little bit. And I was very lucky because well, for two reasons. One, I'd sort of grown up in a family system where it was actively something that was taught. You know, how do we go about this in a manner that's constructive and loving? And also because when I was in college, I was a resident advisor. So that's somebody who's sort of in, and I did this for like 5-6 years, somebody whose job it is to actually manage different conflicts that come up within an area of where people live, a housing community. And as part of that training, we were very thoroughly kind of taught different types of conflict principles and skills and things like that. And so I tried to apply best practices of conflict resolution when I started noticing that this was a conflict-prone environment. But there's a vertical hierarchy in the system, and it became clear to me very quickly that my earlier approach of kill them with kindness and trying to be polite but impartial and present the facts and allow discussion of that was not being heard. There wasn't a receptiveness to it. And in various ways, when I would use my voice, it would lead to a backlash of a punishment of some kind. And so I slowly and gradually stopped using it. And to an extent, I actually, no, not to an extent, I completely drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak. When I was being told that there was something wrong with me, I started to believe that there was something wrong with me. Yeah, so I let both my external boundaries as well as my internal boundaries be violated. I think what's different now is that if I were to go back in, I think that I have a stronger ability to protect my internal boundaries, perhaps, than I did before. I don't think that there's anything that I can do about my external boundaries, but perhaps there are ways within those external boundaries that maybe I can have some agency. And so that maybe that's something to explore, as well as how to keep those internal boundaries resilient. I don't know if that answered your question. I hope.
Well, it does, and I think you brought out something
Sorry.
really important that I'll get to in a moment. But before I dive in a little deeper, I want to ask Dita if there's anything you want to interject as resourcing, as personal preparation before we go a little deeper into the active peace circle process.
Thank you. Actually, I do. I wanted to say that before your mind reader. So Shanti, I just want to, first, I'm really in awe of your courage and humanity. And I just want to remind you, because I know you know these things, to really stay in your body and to just stay. We're here for you. Oh, that's what I want to know and want you to know, that just take care of yourself. And if it's too much, we can slow down, we can continue another time. And yeah, yeah, I'm a bit speechless. Thank you.
Thank you, Dita. So Shanti, you reminded me of something that I actually wouldn't have been reminded of saying it this way if you hadn't shared what you just shared. So typically when someone like yourself is harmed, is interested in conflict transformation, it's something that you have to do. This process is not something that you have to do. In an active peace circle, you would be a participant, but you actually wouldn't be organizing it. So the very first step would be to build a community of support around yourself. People that can advocate for the active peace circle process, people who can participate in it as community members. One of the very beautiful roles in an active peace circle or in a restorative justice circle is the community representative who just comes in bringing the big picture perspective. What are the ripple effects out into the community of this harm, this specific harm that we're dealing with? It's such a powerful role. And then, of course, we want to get some of the people who are primarily responsible for the harm. And in your situation, there's a lot of harm. It's a big system. You know, there's layers. We would really want to get some focus. Okay, what do we want our first active peace circle to focus on? What is the harm? Who are the people involved? Who are the systems people who are not only have some responsibility for the harm, but can also have a voice in how to change the system, right? Because that's an important part of this process, is changing the system. So we're going to want to hear from the systems people about that. They're going to have some things to say about that. This may not be news to them that they're ill-equipped for conflict transformation. And so we're going to want to get the right people. So building what I have called in the past a leadership team or a design team to come together to really look at how we can make this happen and be really honest about it. There's no guaranteed outcome with this. We're in really uncharted new paradigm territory here, right? Yeah. And everyone's always asking me, Scott, where are the models for this? There aren't any that I know of. They're probably out there. I just don't know of them, because this goes beyond restorative justice to really involve the whole community in a meaningful way. And you coming in without attachment to outcome also feels really key and really hard. Right? I know for activists, for people with a lot of care about the world and transforming situations, when I say non-attachment to outcome is an incredible capacity that will serve you, they will often look at me and say, you got to be kidding. You know, I need my attachment to outcome, you know, it's my fuel, you know, it's part of my anger, and we're tapping into something very different in this process. So I guess, assuming that you're in a good place to start this, I would just open up that conversation around who are your allies? You know, who could be a part of that community design team, leadership team that could really move this forward and support you. And, you know, you're going to, you know, it's sort of starting with you. So you will need to be involved at the front end. But the idea is to get support that can get you know, things can get delegated out. We look at, well, who's the best person to talk to the head of the department about this process and about possibly participating. And everyone participating gets support. right? So you as a harmed party in the circle, you would have a support person right there with you if you wanted that. The people responsible for the harm would have support people right there in the circle with them if they needed that. That's a part of restorative justice. That's one thing that carries over here. Then there's the community members, and 3 facilitators is what I recommend here, because this is big. And it's hard for even 2 people to, you know, really hold an intense circle like this. And then everyone gets a voice, right? So one of the tasks of the leadership team and the people doing the outreach is to really explain the process. And I know we've jumped ahead on that, but one thing that's really important that everyone knows is everyone gets a voice, including how to repair the harm. And we really want to, if all we did all we accomplished in a circle was to hear the full extent of the harm, even if people weren't willing to take responsibility and we never got to repair, even if the harm could just be fully heard, that would be a huge thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So what's your sense of where we might go from here? You might go from here.
So I like what you're talking about in terms of this being a bigger circle, you know, of everybody who's kind of impacted by this would be part of it. And the first people that I kind of think of are the patients, because they're the ones who wait for 2 or 3 hours to be seen and then, you know, get substandard care, you know. So I feel like the patients and their families would be like this voice that has been somewhat invisible, really, right? They're never involved in any of the decisions. And I think their voices would be very impactful. That, like, what would it look like for them if you know, their needs were kind of put in the center of what we do.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
feels potent.
Yeah. And I you know, my attempts at trying to do something before were like, I tried to see if I could find an ombudsman, for example, to hold a like a mediation, or, you know, some sort of, but the institution doesn't have an ombuds. Like, it has one for the undergrads and the grad students, but for some reason it does not include postgraduates. And so it was just not an option that was available. And then those the people who you're talking about who have the power to change the system were not interested. And so I wasn't sure, like, if we wanted to have a peace circle, I mean, I think we would start by saying, okay, so we've got patients and their families, you know, we've got the nurses and other like ancillary staff, let's say, that work in the different departments that we kind of work with, coordinate care with. There are the other consulting teams that we often coordinate with. So neurology is a big one, neurosurgery is another big one, ENT is another big one. So those different teams that we commonly work with that rely on our services. My co-residents, This one's a little bit difficult because so many of my co-residents have developed mental illness since starting the program and are now being treated. And it's kind of been one of two things. Either they had an outcome like mine, or they this part's a little hard for me. They took on the role of the person who does harm, and I don't have I don't have any anger or resentment or anything like that towards them. I think that it's a method of survival sometimes.
Yeah.
I think they're in pain. And so I think that all of those people need to be part of the system. I mean, even I caused harm by being an ambassador of the system, right? So I think what's difficult is knowing how to have the that conversation of, can we have an active peace circle, and getting buy-in for people to actually show up in the first place. I think having people show up in the first place would be a big achievement. And like you said, there has to be an attitude of non-attachment. And so I have to assume that it's possible that we reach out and there isn't a response either, and we sort of have to kind of be okay with that.
Yeah. Can I just pause you there?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really rich what you shared. And I always need to be careful to make this particular distinction between things like non-attachment to outcome. That's a pretty high bar that not everyone in this who would participate in the circle, we wouldn't even ask that of them, because they wouldn't know what to make of it. But the people who are promoting this model, and people like yourself who have a well-developed sense of self and a high level of, call it, spiritual maturity, with folks like that, we can talk about that. But we wouldn't expect that of, department heads necessarily, right? So there's kind of two levels of resource that I talk about when I talk about this work. And Shanti, we would just do it one step at a time. And I love how you started with patients, because I could imagine that patients are people that the systems folks, if the stage is set for it, they will feel like they have to listen to, whereas just one student, not so much. But if we organize this properly, we can really, I think it feels possible to create the incentive. And so we always want to, just like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, they applied that pressure, but they always did it from a place of respect. And so it's the same here. Just throughout the process, it's respect, it's relationship. The 5 R's of restorative justice that we bring in here first is respect, and then it's responsibility, right? We ask those who cause the harm to take responsibility. And what you just named, everyone probably would have a little responsibility to take, you know, in terms of causing some harm. You know, it's a very paradoxical situation where you're really caught in a system that makes it really hard to not feel like you're causing harm. So imagine in a circle where it wasn't just all about the system's people taking responsibility, but other people like yourself could take some responsibility. And that's a way to get to really humanize it, to keep it in the heart, and make it equitable that way. And nurses, you mentioned, that also feels like a very potent stakeholder group, we could call it. And just one more thing about the patients. So just right there, thinking about patients as the third side in the conflict, we can be very strategic about what patients we invite into this. We might think of patients who are also staff, you know, who will really have a lot to say about this system and how to change it, you know, or patients who are also advocates, you know, who just people who bring in added dimensions that will be useful in bringing out the full extent of the harm and being very creative around how to change the system and how to repair the harm. So starting from the bottom up, right? Patients, nurses, and then coming together and, you know, picking a couple of those folks to really be actively involved in this, making this happen. Still with the community support. Looking at, okay, well, now let's think about those chairs of the department, you know, who could be a candidate for something like this? Who has some power to change things and might be able to come into this and really listen, really hear us? So from the bottom up, it builds. Dita, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something that I found really amazing about this process, and perhaps answering a bit the question or fear of Shanti of having this enormous, what happens if they don't show up, the upper layers as well. And remembering what you said, Scott, at some point in the session that you gave, that active peace circles can be modular, and so you can start small. You don't have to start with the big everything. You can have starting some, and then that kind of expands, and then you get more people that can be in your support, and then just you don't have to tackle the huge problem from the beginning. And that, I find that very powerful. Yeah,
thank you. Because this is community led, there's all kinds of creative ways to structure the progress, right? So just the patients, there could be a circle just for the patients to be heard. One of the mantras in restorative justice at the beginning of the process is vent, validate. You know, let people vent their frustrations, get it out before they get in the circle with the other folks. There's all this preparation that goes in. So the facilitators meet with the different parties and hear their stories and let them vent and get it out of their systems and validate those needs and those concerns. And, you know, that could happen with any of these groups. You know, it's very organic that way. And there's also some principles and practices that hold the integrity of it together. So just like restorative justice in the criminal justice system in the West, built slowly over time because people saw it was transformative and effective, I have the same vision for this active peace circle model. But I feel really strongly that we have to be true to its principles and its practices. So those 5 R's really frame it and make it really practical. Respect, and the ground rules that we use are really all about respect. Respectful body language, I statements, speaking from your own experience, taking the time that you need to check in before you share, speaking when it's your turn. It's all about respect. So respect, responsibility, relationship, really prioritizing these relationships, right? And that's another thing that comes from nonviolence, right? From Gandhian, Kingian nonviolence is respecting the relationships, even if you disagree strongly with people's positions. And then repair is the 4th R, and reintegration is the 5th R, which really sets the bar high. Reintegration says if we've come together, if we have managed to repair the harm to the fullest extent possible, heal the harm to the fullest extent possible, then everyone can reintegrate back into the community, back into the system without lingering blame, shame, and resentment. So that tells us how high we're setting the bar here. And for me, Shanti, I wanted to say this at some point, I'll just say it now. One of the principles that I hold very close when I am doing this work is that we're healing the root cause of violence and disrespect. We're healing the belief that we're separate through a lived experience of interrelatedness and coming together in this very human, very heart-centered way. In the circle, we really feel how we're not separate, right? It's like interpersonal relationships, right? We know that when there's resentments, we're impacted by it. You know, it is really what makes it clearer than any other thing in life, I think, just how interrelated we are. So, yeah, just to again underscore building from the ground up. And one of the things that might be a little paradoxical to that, one of the ways that I articulate the importance of not re-victimizing is having a sense that those who cause the harm will want to participate in this. So if we imagine a scenario, Shanti, where you invest a lot of time and energy preparing for this and building your allies, and it turns out that no one in the system with power to change that system wants to participate, that could hurt. That could feel a little bit like re-victimization, like a slap in the face. And so this really is paradoxical. I'm just sitting with it now. We want to try to avoid that. So how do we do that here? I don't really know. But one of the principles we hold very dear in restorative justice and that I bring over into active peace circles is do not re-victimize. What's your take on that? How could we do that here?
I do I do think that, you know, there would be, like, I would be gutted if that happened. But that being said, I think that there's still tremendous healing that happens even if the rest of the community comes together, because they still get to do that part that you're talking about of like venting and discuss. I mean, even if the people who have the power to change the system don't show up, but everybody else who was impacted by it gets to show up and share their story, there's a healing that comes out of that, I think, still, because part of what was so damaging for me was going through this alone. And I think there's this conspiracy of silence that sort of happens with this. And there's a lot of people that are going through it alone. I think even the patients, that's sort of happening for them, right? Because they don't, all they see is us. They see us. They don't know who's responsible for the things that are happening to them or what parts of the system are moving that cog. You know, they have the experience that they have in the hospital, and then they go home and then they have to live with that or sit with that. And so I think a lot of healing can come just from that. And one other thing that I hadn't mentioned is, you know, the secretary or the unit secretary, the janitors and cleaning people, they even if they have more of an indirect role, they are witnesses, they see things, they have perspectives that they can offer too, that I think are useful. And I think in some ways I'm actually okay with this idea of non-attachment, because it also opens you up to kind of what you were talking about with creativity. Like, you don't know what's going to come out of this, but maybe that's great, because maybe the amazing idea is going to come from the janitor who's been like watching all along, seeing these different players in the game, like doing their thing, you know. I don't know. Maybe we haven't imagined up what something better could look like yet. We don't know what it's going to look like. And so I don't know about the re-victimization part, like the best way to optimizes our chances of that not happening. But I think even doing that first part is still better than doing nothing, because yeah, I think you can still get some healing from that.
Yeah, and if you can hold non-attachment to outcome in an authentic way and not be kidding yourself, I think that goes really far towards not re-victimizing. I love what you said about not knowing. You really nailed it with that, I think. So I'm looking at the time, and Dita, I want to ask if you want to close the.
Yeah, I wanted to mention. This is time is such a.
Yeah. I'm
not going to say the word. So I just wanted to say something that's been in my mind a lot recently, but particularly now, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that about the re-victimization, because it can be really frustrating and traumatizing. And so going back to the idea of having kind of starting small, and Alan put in the chat very beautifully, in reducing suffering, every small success makes a difference and builds upon itself. So it's a way of creating resilience if you start small. And I've been exploring ways of tackling different issues, but I think it's appropriate here as well, is if you start not only small, but in the place where you expect to have the best success. So if you start in a place that is already ready for it, and you build from there, your chances of getting re-traumatized or re-victimized are every time they're going to be smaller, because you have a larger support and a larger confidence, and you come from a better place as well. So that's what was emerging while I was listening to you.
Lovely, lovely. Well, I feel like there was some good things that came out. I think there was quite a bit that came out there, and your additions, Dita and Shanti, and I haven't looked at the chat yet, so I would love to Shall we harvest the wisdom there?
Yes.
Collective wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe I'm just too used to doing ceremony and circus and stuff. Maybe we just have just 2 breaths to kind of close this moment, this space, and I just ask everyone to feel again that container that we're building for Shanti and this amazingly intricate and big conflict. And I just see Shanti like a ray of light in the middle, like a beacon, and I see these circles of support coming towards her. May it be so. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Just Ben is back, and I invite everyone to turn on your videos again. Oops, not like I did.
Suggestion.
Yes.
That we take a minute to send Shanti some positive and healing energy and support by looking directly into the camera. And Shanti, you can have us in gallery view and see all of us looking directly at you for that moment of silence. And sometimes we're in this view with, we're all looking in different directions, and or I'm looking at the screen, which means the camera up here isn't quite in my gaze, but I've tried this before and it sometimes works.
Thank you, Ben.
Kind, beautiful, loving faces.
Thank you so much. I didn't see your faces, but I could feel the energy. And again, this feels so cruel. I'm always taking time for things. One day I'm going to break all the clocks in the world. So, if anybody has a burning question right now, just dig in while I just look at the chat. There's so much love coming from the chat to you, Shanti, as well. Hoon, you have a question?
It's not a question. It's more something from my own experience, which is that unfortunately, this is not an infrequent happening to doctors in training. And I know that because I'm a consultant physician in the UK. It is a hierarchy. It is brutal, unkind, and the hierarchy tends to try and protect itself. It's just that is how it works. That's how it's designed to work. And what I found useful when I was in training was that it's sometimes better to have your allies come from outside the organization, because if your allies come from within the organization, they are also part of the same structure. So what worked for some of us when we were in training was that we had to find our allies first. And then once we are on more solid ground, we can then go back into the system. It is sometimes quite difficult to find allies within the medical system.
Yeah, that sounds like wise counsel. Hoon would be a great community member, community representative for a circle like this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex, you have your hand raised.
When I was listening about the possibility that if there are some members that could not come to the system, how could you invite them to be in the system? And what comes to my mind, it's something that I want to share. What comes to my mind was the systemic model of constellations that can be used in family constellations or organizational constellations. And Scott probably would tell me if this is also used in this model. That comes to my mind immediately. I have that insight. If you could somehow invite that kind of model, so invite other people in the system that can somehow hold that position. As Shanti mentioned, no? I can invite the janitor, I can invite the secretary, I can invite somehow linking other people to heal the system. So approaching the system in another way. And that's one of the things I felt really powerful. She's looking to approach the system in this way. And I need to say that also it was a healing process for myself. We are all connected. We are an interbeing. And I also see a mirror in my own conflicts in a system similar like yours. So it's not only your system that is healing here. In my case, was very inspirational. Thank you so much, Shanti. Really. Thank you.
Alex, can I ask, in that constellation model, so that could be people who actually aren't in the system but are just representing that role, or it could be people that are in that role. Yeah, this is one of the beautiful additions that could come. Trust me, that's not a part of restorative justice. It's not a part of active peace circles that I've built in, but this is where the community wisdom comes into play. So it's just a really beautiful, hopeful, healing, energy or something. I don't know what, but thank you.
Yeah, I saw Ellen's hand was up, and I would suggest, and Lillian too, we have these 2 more questions, and then we want to just explore kind of everybody gathering ideas in the chat for the last 4 minutes and or so. So Ellen and then Lillian. Thank you. You know, as I was listening to you, Shanti, I was thinking about the medical system in general, and just the underlying, I want to say, and this is not to degrade the dedication of the people who are in it, or you or anybody else, but the focus on scientific materialism and the separation of the spirit from the material approach, for me, feels like the underpinning of this whole conflict. I think we could have a session on that.
Absolutely.
Lillian. Thank you, Ellen.
Yes, I agree. But I think even when you take it to the physical level, where you have heart wards, people having heart operations, where they're still offered chips and pies for their lunch. Seriously. Where the food is not actually seen as part of the healing system. It's majorly problematic. And I think your major allies are the patients. But having that place where the patients can actually express how they feel about having themselves ignored. Although many are like my mother, they've got wonderful optician for their eyes, she wasn't terribly happy about the fact that she was asked to wait for 2 hours before she was able to go to the toilet because of the stress on the staff. So I think you would probably find that there's a major ally relationship with the patients, but that has always been a slightly difficult place to be in relationship with the consultant hierarchy. And I think it must be even worse in a system where there is not a national health service, but where the money is being made by the people really high up the system. And thank you. And the spirit with you anytime you want.
Thank you.
Quick comment. So I think it becomes clear with the challenging scenario why active peace circles can be rightfully thought of as a nonviolent campaign, right? And I'm reminded of activists that a lot of us are familiar with, people like Joanna Macy and Vandana Shiva, and they know as much as anybody, if not more, just what we're up against. And yet they come at it with so much joy and heart, not because they're attached to outcome, but because they say, well, what else are you going to do? You know, we do what we can, and we bring our full selves and our heart to this. And we know it's a marathon, and so just, I don't know, that energy is up for me as we kind of move towards the end of the session.
Same here. And yeah, at least, yeah, I'm not in Chicago, I'm very far, but you have the energy of my support is there fully. Well, it would be so lovely to now listen to every one of you, but unfortunately time is again. So what I had thought it would be a way of everybody, if not being listened, at least being read, is that if we take about half a minute by ourselves, or between half a minute and a minute, to just wrap up whatever is coming up for you right now, and either write it in the chat, but don't send it. I just recently learned of this thing called a Zoom chat bomb. So if you're all writing, but don't press the enter, and in about a minute we all send it together. And I'll ring a bell so you don't have to worry about the time. So when you hear the bell, just press enter. Woo.
Kind of reminds me of, you know, when you play solitaire on the computer and then you click on that last one and it just goes fades off over your screen.
Yes. Wow, this, yeah. I'm very glad that you said at the beginning, Scott, that this is, we don't know what's going to come out. And yeah, I'm really surprised and in a very good place myself. I don't know, it's just, I'm a bit at a loss at the moment about how to close. I actually know how to close it, but I don't know. Do you want to say something, Shanti and Scott, before saying goodbye to these beautiful people?
I think I'd like to close it the way I opened it. Just send my gratitude out to all of you in the same way that you sent your love out to me, for being here and spending this time. And it matters what you did for the last 90 minutes, all of you. We don't know what's going to happen next, but you have been a small part of my healing. So thank you so much. And anybody who didn't get a chance to say what they wanted to say or have the conversation they wanted to have, feel, you know, you are welcome to reach out to me anytime you want. I'm on the Mighty Networks, and I'll pop my email in here. Yeah, if I can be of any help to you also, please let me know. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your help today. And especially thanks to Scott and Dita, who really, this was a labor of love for them. So make sure you keep a little piece of their hearts in with this too. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanti. I really am touched at the moment. And the only thing I want to just add is my gift to the summit that was a part of my interview is recordings of a webinar series I gave on Restorative Justice Unleashed. There's 5 sessions that are readily available. There's a list of resources with active peace circle principles and the ground rules, and it's all there for you at the number 4activepeace.com, my website. You just go to Peacemaker Training and it'll be right there for you. And I think someone already put the website in the chat. So thank you. I'm really touched and happy to have been a part of this. And let's do it. let's put this into practice. Wherever you live, I am here to support you in it. That's what gets me up in the morning. I believe in this, and there's a way that we can trust this process to not create harm and to have a positive impact. So I close with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being part of this, for being game, and yeah, and replying to my many emails. Well, not that many, but like, yeah. And thank you, Shanti. I'm so really, well, I'm not impressed because you've raised the bar about what to expect from you. So, but I'm still deeply, deeply moved. Yeah, I just would like to spend another minute releasing this field that we've created, this container. And by releasing it, I don't mean destroying it, just letting it know that today we are done. This has been supportive. We've been together in this and we remain linked in many ways. But this connection that we have now, we can let go. And as we do that, feel again our bodies, our hearts, perhaps the air as it comes in and it goes out. It's a bit of a caress to your heart. And I will say to my heart, thank you. Thank you for what you've done today. Thanks for making this very large home possible. And again, feeling where we are sitting or standing, feeling the support of the ground, the earth underneath it. And letting our bodies know that they can take a break from holding the tension. Whatever tension is there can stay, but it doesn't have to. And taking in a sense of connection and love that has been so beautifully shared by all of you in this 90 minutes. And letting it be a smile expanding from our hearts and carrying us in the rest of our days or nights. Thank you so much for coming and making this possible.
Thank you, Dita.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Shanti. Thank you all.
We didn't hear that, Kalu, if you were talking to us.
Oh, she's frozen.
Mm.
No, she was leaving.
Shanti, I'm so inspired by you.
I just wanted to say
Thank you, Dita. It was amazing.
I'm inspired by you, Vinita ji. You taught me so much. And we didn't even, I forgot to thank Ben. Our tech fairy and the person who's made this whole thing possible in the first place.
Well, with a lot of help.
Still.
Thank you, Ben.
Nunu and Eva were working on it long before I came along.
Ben, may I ask you something?
Sure.
Whenever I have, it's my previous experience also that whenever someone thanks you for organizing this whole thing, you always dismiss it by saying that, oh, Nuno and Eva have been working on it for so long. But you're doing a lot. You have been at it. So please accept our compliments. Please accept our gratitude.
I have a feeling that some of my role may be a little more visible than theirs, and so I do think it's important.
Yeah, but acknowledging one role does not minimize the other, right?
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Sounds like we need Scott again. There's a conflict here. Scott, come.
Oh, but there isn't really, because see, love is infinite. I can give infinite love to you, Ben, and Eva and Nuno get my infinite love as well. So, and
Yes.
gratitude.
Yes.
So this
Thank
is one
you
place
all.
where there doesn't need to be a conflict because there's no limit on the resource.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Anne.
Bye,
Thank
and
you for coming.
And I do feel very much appreciated for what I've offered here and recognize.
Thank you. Shanti,
I can hear you, Vinita ji.
can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. So I want to just bring it at the table before we leave this space.
You might have to turn your video off again, Vinita.
For you to really, really create a container of for you to really create a container of self-care and strengthen your own anchoring. Because when you step into something like this, there'll be a lot of anger coming towards you. There'll be a lot of accusations. There'll be a lot of, resistance. People will be trying to make you wrong from left, center, and right. So strengthening yourself and anchoring yourself is a very important part of this whole process. I think the beginning is there and then the rest follows. I just wanted to say this before I go off.
Yes, that's very wise advice. And I'm definitely starting that building process. So we'll see step by step, day by day. Thank you, Vinita ji. Thank you for coming.
It has been a pleasure. It has been a gift for me. Thank you.
Thank you, lovely one.